I retrieved the telephone from the nightstand and uttered a series of inaudible exclamations, pondering the identity of the individual who would be contacting me at such an unconventional hour. At 30 minutes past midnight, I observed the number of my wife on the screen. Before I could utter a word, I heard a sob emanating from the other end. My initial reaction was one of anger, but it dissipated rapidly. I responded with a calm and reassuring tone, inquiring about the situation. The caller, who was visibly distressed, informed me that they were cold and wet. I asked about the source of the moisture and was informed that it was coming from their sleeping bag. A puddle of water had formed on the floor of the tent. The child inquired about the possibility of assistance in drying off. His mother was not present, and he was confused about her whereabouts. It was the middle of the night, and he was unsure of her location. He recalled her tucking him and his sister into bed after their barbecue dinner and heading over to Uncle Dave's tent. He then asked why he had not accompanied her. "Get her," she instructed, "and stay in your tent at all costs." She would be enraged if she were to be disturbed. My blood pressure was rapidly rising. Dave Murdoch, my wife's brother-in-law, was a morally reprehensible individual who frequently made inappropriate remarks to my wife and touched her inappropriately. Approximately 1 week ago, my wife, Mandy, proposed that we visit our preferred campground, situated approximately 2 hours outside of town in the foothills. It is a picturesque location that we have frequented on 3 or 4 occasions annually. My sister-in-law, Sue, and her husband, Dave, had also agreed to accompany us. I am an architect, primarily engaged in the design of high-end residential properties. The houses are individually designed for select customers. I do not advertise my reputation, which is well established from word-of-mouth referrals. I have enough projects coming up to keep me busy for at least the next 2 years. My family and I live in a 3-level home in a leafy suburb in the outer metropolitan area. My design studio occupies the top floor. We were due to leave home after the children finished school on Friday. It was a 2-hour drive to the campsite, so we would have plenty of time to set up camp before darkness set in. The campsite was 2 hours away by car, allowing sufficient time to set up the camp before nightfall. Builder, who had collaborated with me on numerous project homes, called the day before to report an issue with the house we were constructing. He had a feeling that the roof design was defective and would fail in severe weather, despite a structural engineer having examined and approved the roof structure upon examination of the architectural drawings. I concurred with the builder's assessment and scheduled a meeting on the construction site the following Friday morning. It became evident that the redesign process would require more than a few hours, so I contacted Mandy and proposed that she bring her children in her vehicle so that I could join them at a later date on Saturday. She was agreeable to this arrangement, allowing me to focus on rectifying the design flaws. This brings us to the phone conversation on Friday night, or rather Saturday morning. "Is your brother there?" I inquired gently, attempting to calm my frustration. "Is his sleeping bag dry?" "Yes, sir." "Is your mother's sleeping bag there?" "Yes, sir." "Is it dry?" "Affirmative." "I would like you and Mikey to pack your clothes into your carry bags. You should then climb into your mother's sleeping bag and stay in the dry part of the tent. I will depart immediately and proceed directly to your tent. Is it situated in the customary location within the campground?" "Affirmative." "I will now collect my belongings, retire for the evening, and inform you of my arrival. Good night, Pum." "Good night, Daddy." With minimal traffic on the roads, I omitted the second trip. The journey, which should have taken approximately an hour and a half, took slightly longer due to the necessity of locating our bright orange tent, which was situated in close proximity to our usual camping location. The reason for this was the presence of water in the game ingress. My wife had pitched the tent on an incline, with the lower side positioned in a 3-point landing. Upon encountering a deep puddle, I brought the car to a stop alongside it. I then opened the tent flap, and the beam of my flashlight revealed my 2 sleeping companions. They were sound asleep, snuggled up against each other on the high side of the tent. Their packed bags were side by side next to their sleeping bags. They responded groggily from being awakened, but I gently placed both of them in the back of the car. I then proceeded to place the sleeping bags over their bodies and deposit their carry bags on the front passenger seat. I was able to recognize Dave's tent from approximately 50 meters away, noting that his vehicle was parked a couple of steps in front of the entrance. I then approached the tent with a sense of quiet urgency, reaching down to draw the entry zip completely open. As I did so, I immediately directed my flashlight inside, where I was able to discern the figure of my brother. It appeared that Dave had positioned the two sisters on either side of him, with one sleeping bag serving as a bed and the other as a cover. Dave immediately responded by ordering the intruder to leave the tent, stating that he was perving and creep people out. I maintained a steady beam of light as Dave removed the cover, exposing both women in a state of undress. Dave then advanced on me, holding the flashlight with a steady hand. I attempted to avoid contact with the intruder by stepping to one side. He continued his advance out of the tent. As he passed, I struck him with my work boot, causing him to howl in pain and collide with his own car door with a groan. He fell heavily into the wet earth. I then turned my attention back to the tent, noticing that both women had attempted to conceal themselves and were exhibiting signs of distress. At last, I broke my silence, suggesting that Dave might require assistance. To my wife, I said, "You can keep the tent, darling, since you won't be returning home anytime soon. I'm taking the children." "You can't do this to me," she replied. "It isn't what it looks like." She was yelling at me from behind as I deliberately walked back to the car, started the engine, and began the engine. The children, roused by the commotion, both sat up and gazed out of the car windows as the lights were illuminated in the neighboring tents. Their father called out to Mikey, inquiring as to why their mother had arrived in such a state of undress. As the headlight swept across her, she froze, shielding her eyes from the intense brightness. "I'm uncertain, Mikey," their father replied. "Perhaps we can inquire about this matter further when we return to camp." The children were then instructed to lie down and resume their rest. The law had a challenging time. He had hit his head on his car door, breaking a bone in his leg and concussing him. I was hoping he would attempt to sue me for assault, but that did not work out. He made no attempt to report the occurrence. My legal advisor is a great friend and astute commercial negotiator, but told me immediately that family matters, their polite terminology for divorce, is not his area of expertise. He did, however, refer me to an associate who had the reputation. After elucidating the circumstances of the weekend, I made it clear that I desired custody of our two children. I further stated that any mother who could leave her children unattended in an open campground to further her own carnal aspirations was not a suitable person to have control of children. The lawyer's lips curled in eager anticipation of a legal battle. It is not often that a father is granted custody by the family court, and he took it as the divorce proceedings were protracted and lasted 18 months. I did not contest her request for visitation rights, and the court ruled that I was a suitable custodial parent due to the nature of my work. Around the same time, Mandy's sister, Sue, divorced Dave. Dave did not contest the divorce, and they were officially separated well before my divorce was finalized. It appears that Sue was not an active participant in the relationship with her husband and sister. In contrast, I am not seeking another relationship. I have a strong attachment to my two children and prioritize spending time with them. Initially, Mandy visited several times a week, but the frequency decreased to every couple of weeks. Currently, we are fortunate to see her once a month. She has expressed frustration that the children are unkind towards her. I occasionally date, and there was an occasion when I considered asking my ex-wife to watch the children. My wife suggested that I bring the children to her house, but they immediately vetoed that idea. Consequently, the friendly elderly lady who lives nearby stays with them on the rare occasions when I go out. The children think she is great fun when I take her out for the evening. I was sitting at a bar with a friend when a gentle tap on my shoulder turned me around. It was Sue. She smiled at me, and we spent the next 3 hours catching up on the past 3 years. My wife has recently come to the conclusion that alcohol is the solution to her problems. She dates frequently but finds it challenging to maintain relationships. Sue dated infrequently after her divorce from Dave. She was content with her circumstances but regretted her inability to start a family. "You are fortunate to have your two beautiful children," she said wistfully. "I would love to care for them if ever. You require childcare. I propose that we have dinner together tomorrow night. I am not an expert cook, but I am an excellent barbecue chef." The two children were excited the following evening. They had not seen their aunt since that fateful weekend and were looking forward to her arrival. The steaks were delicious, and the fresh salad I purchased earlier was ideal. I was disappointed. After tucking the children into bed, I observed that they were reluctant to leave their aunt, who they were eager to spend time with. I opened a bottle of red wine from Barossa Valley while we conversed. During our discussion, I learned that Dave had developed a strong attraction to my wife since joining our family and was consistently attempting to persuade Sue to encourage her sister to reconcile with him. At the campground, he initiated contact and convinced my former spouse that I was unaware of his feelings. He frequently informed Sue that he had married the wrong sister. The camp incident proved to be the final catalyst for Sue's actions. She moved closer to me and placed an arm over my shoulder. We kissed tentatively. I was uncertain about the appropriateness of this gesture, but I was also reluctant to forego the opportunity. My reserved sister, my in-law, suddenly turned and, before I had the opportunity to react, we were engaged in a passionate embrace. She suggested that we retire to the bedroom, and I acquiesced. I am aware that I may have married the wrong sister, but I intend to rectify this as soon as possible. I would be interested to hear your views on this.